Paper was like gold in medieval times.
Oh, not tobacco, sugar.
That everything we thought we knew about the world might turn out to be completely wrong.
In April 2010, the drilling rig Deepwater Horizon blew up in the Gulf of Mexico. Approximately 780 million liters of crude gushed into the Gulf, unleashing the most severe ecological disaster in U.S. history. Is our insatiable thirst for oil driving us into these catastrophes? Still, we are floating in energy, making the day out of night. Oil is the motor of modern civilization. Without fuel, neither mobility nor prosperity can continue at its current speed. Every day, we are burning 14 billion liters of this precious substance. Has our addiction forced us into a fatal trap in just a few generations? Without diesel and fertilizer, which is produced from petroleum, modern agriculture simply cannot continue to exist. From plastics to clothes to medicines, this fossil liquid comprises so many things. An increasing number of scientists now believe we've passed the peak of world oil production. Is this a race that can be won? Billions are invested in research and technology. But when asked about the remaining reserves, the oil producers remain silent. Houston, Texas. Until 2010, this is where Matt Simmons worked as one of the most successful oil technology investors.
There is zero transparency for what's really happening in the top 100 to 200 oil fields in the world, how much they're producing even.
Approximately 4,000 oil fields are currently in production. But half of the global oil production relies only on 120 giant fields. These giant fields, unfortunately, are not distributed evenly across the globe. If and how many new oil fields will be discovered will decide our world's future. All giant oil fields were tapped more than 40 years ago, and their production is waning from year to year. The question of how much of this black gold still remains inside our planet is a constant and increasing debate among scientists, politicians, and economists. The International Energy Agency in Paris, known as the IEA, has, for the first time, begun to monitor the actual production of all the major oil fields.
We made a research on 800 oil fields or oil wells over the world. The decline of the existing oil field is really enormous. 6.7% of decline rate means yearly about 4.7 million barrels per day decline. So we have to find 5 million barrels per day every year. That's a huge, let's say, we need every year about Iran or Iraq. That's what we mean.
If the data of the present production numbers are correct, the peak of our oil production has passed already. Research dollars are funneled meanwhile into a more efficient exploitation of existing fields. Austria. Until the 1960s, Austria could satisfy all of its oil needs by local fields alone. In 50 years now, the pumping from the deep Vienna Basin supplies only 13% of Austria's demand. Now the Austrian oil company searches in 6,000 meters of depth. Such extreme drilling operations only became profitable due to the rise of global energy prices. To achieve drilling at such depth, about 200 drill pipes need to be joined together.
We reached a depth of 6,017 meters using an 8 3/4 inch drill, then cemented around the casing, then unfortunately lost the drill head.
Not an easy job. The drill pipes got stuck in different layers of rock. Drillmaster Vinta chooses the proper drill head for the next level. Gently, they restart the engines. The drill pipes, weighing 60 tons, made of 6 kilometers of steel, constantly drag on the machinery. Every drill hole is a financial venture. In the headquarters, geologist Philip Strauss analyzes data acquired at depth to better control the drill bit.
This is the ultimate test. Once the drilling starts, each hole costs 10 to 20 million euros, and this is the amount of money it takes to verify my projections.
Buried millions of years ago, submerged mountain ranges become visible within the seismic profile. Within these ranges, they believe rising gas and oil has been trapped.
In 3 to 3,500 meters, we expect permeable and porous layers, which might contain hydrocarbons. One option is to go down to 5,000 meters, the other to 5,500. I'd consider both of them. Going deeper, we might get problems with the increasing weight of the equipment.
For each hole, the well design is different. At this stage, there are still no guarantees of success. On average, an American consumes 20 times more oil than a Chinese or an Indian. If Asia were to catch up to U.S. consumption rates, the global production would have to rise by more than 300% per day. The global population has doubled since the 1950s. Thanks to diesel, fertilizer, and heavy equipment, farming yield rates have increased by 250% during this time. Without oil, modern agriculture will not be able to feed the world population. Also, the industrial fishing fleets will cease working when the price of diesel rises too high.
We really need to be going from 85 to 120 million barrels a day in the next 20 years. Realistically, they now know that we can't get there.
Commercial exploitation started at the beginning of the 20th century. Large petroleum deposits were found within prehistoric ocean basins. Over millions of years, decaying algae and plankton sank to the bottom. Covered by sand and layers of clay, the organic mass remained sealed from oxidation. As heat and pressure built up, the debris transformed into hydrocarbons. Now, having less weight, the gas and oil moved upwards until getting trapped by impermeable layers of rock. To this day, no technology exists to predict with 100% certainty where these reservoirs are hiding below. Berlin. Geologist Wolfgang Kiesling is specialized on prehistoric reefs. Petrifactions and microfossils give hints where millions of years ago a rich and blooming fauna and flora existed. Within the porosity of the ancient coral reefs, ample space was created, ideal spaces to collect the uprising crude. Over millions of years, much of the slowly rising petroleum got trapped within such prehistoric reefs.
These are fragments of red algae. Here are fragments of foraminifer.
Ancient reefs measuring kilometers in depth evolved because the ocean floor dropped due to tectonic shifting, and the corals continued to grow in height.
This blue color shows the porous space inside the coral and how they link to each other perfectly.
20% of all discovered crude was located in these types of buried coral banks. Yet the positioning of these prehistoric reefs has changed tremendously due to plate tectonic shifting over millions of years. Because of this, the search for oil equals the proverbial search for the needle in the haystack.
This area, in the south of China, but also this region has great potential.
Southeast Asia might turn into a new hotspot. Still, to this day, most reserves have been discovered along the Persian Gulf.
From the bottom of Oman up to Kirkuk in the top of Iraq, every oil field of any size in the Middle East is within that triangle.
Yet precisely this triangle yields very few reef structures. The oil was trapped in carbonate and sandstone close to tectonic borders.
And in 70 years of exploration, they found little pockets of oil elsewhere.
The methods to discover new reservoirs have been refined over the last century. Nevertheless, geologists are far from being able to predict new locations where hydrocarbons exist. Only 10% of all exploration drill holes are successful. And from discovery to the delivery of the first drops, it takes approximately 10 years. So far, no other energy form exists that is as dense and easy to transport as oil. Without oil, global trade would stop functioning. Presently, about 14 billion liters of oil are used each day. In 20 years, the demand is supposed to rise another 20%. From what reservoirs this demand is to be fed is still unknown.
Even just to offset the decline, we need 4 Saudi Arabias. Do we have 4 Saudi Arabias? That is the biggest question.
Saudi Arabia is the largest global oil supplier at present. Just some 80 years ago, few roads existed in this country. Today, modernization has merged with traditional life. Thousands of kilometers of asphalt lead through the desert below Hajj Khavar. The oil field was discovered in 1948. With a length of 280 kilometers, it is the largest of all reservoirs ever found. Saudi Arabia promises to deliver another 70 years without problems. However, no details are presented as proof of these statements, in spite of oil data collected second by second and transmitted via satellite to their research headquarters at Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil company. A team of international specialists is pushed to tap one new well after the next.
We can optimize the development of our oil and gas reservoirs. Horizontal wells have several advantages over vertical wells. They have increased production rates. They can produce up to 3,000 barrels per day. And these wells have a capacity to produce up to 8,000 barrels per day, which is a huge increase.
Before, it was sufficient to drill a vertical hole into the ground. Today, the bore holes are curved horizontally at depth. The engineers land precisely into an oil layer thousands of meters below. The new reservoir is a few meters thick only, no comparison to the 100 times deeper and wider giant oil field Khawar. Many wells which have been exploited industrially are now suffering a similar fate. By depleting the reservoir, the internal ambient pressure decreases so much that the oil stops coming out of the hole by itself.
We have to increase the pressure. So what's the best way and the cheapest way? We drill wells on the edge of the reservoir and we start dumping water. Now the water will go down and then will enter the reservoir and we'll start pushing the oil and raising the pressure. So those wells in the middle of the reservoir will feel the pressure rise and start producing oil again.
Is now the easy oil getting scarce in the Gulf states?
And here's the gas cap remaining, and here's the remaining oil that an aquifer influx was stronger than anticipated. gas injection was stopped in 2001 and water injection of gas depth was started for pressure maintenance and to prevent oil from resaturating. They decided to experiment with what at the time was a very radical concept. What if we basically re-inject water?
Subterraneous stone formations differ in their porosity. Once the water finds easier, passable cracks, it starts to bypass the dense oil.
The water will find the production well, and then you find yourself producing water. You inject water and you produce water. Not very profitable.
Also in Austria, they had to start to pump more water into the depth to drive up the remaining deposits. Afterwards, the water is separated and controlled. As oil floats to the surface, it is easy to separate from the water. In Austria, the proportion of water to oil has reached up to 92%. Beyond a ratio of 98%, the production no longer is profitable.
We still have enough residual oil. The task of this facility is to remove this residual entirely.
The increasing water-to-oil ratio is a sure indication for a depleting field.
This is no one screw-up. This is a systemic problem that swept the globe.
Only through incredible investments can new oil fields be developed. Therefore, an increasing amount of research dollars is spent on increasing the recovery factor of an aging field. In the Shell Technology Center in the Netherlands, Matthias Pixel and his research team work on technologies which shall increase the recoverable reserves globally.
So when we look at the average oil field in the world, the recovery from that is about 35%. So that means 65% of the oil actually stays in the ground.
Together with PDO, the Petroleum Development of Oman, Shell has developed a new substance, a polymer liquid of a similar viscosity as oil, thereby much better matched than water to press the crude out of the reservoir stone.
And you can then sweep out the oil out of the pores.
It's still a sophisticated process to fabricate these polymers, as hydrocarbons differ in substance from reservoir to reservoir. Every polymer lotion has to be adapted to each individual oil field. The liquid is furthermore enriched with the dispersant to enhance the release of the petroleum from the underground rock. Thorough testing of the process to be used minimizes the economic risk. Later, polymers valuing more than €1 million per day will be pumped into the reservoir. Whether this method meets the expectations remains to be proven on a field trial starting soon. In Oman, the injection of polymers started on a large scale in 2010. It might take 2 to 3 years before showing results, but if successful, it means a quantum leap for the global oil production.
If we take a look at this particular oil and surfactant mixture, we assume to be able to increase the recovery factor by 10 to 20% for that particular oil field, which is remarkable.
If the recovery can be increased by only 1% globally, it could secure enough extra supply for another 3 years.
The critical matter is, for each reservoir, any sort of crude, we have to assemble a new cocktail.
As long as the polymer usage is still questionable, much investment is channeled into the discovery of new oil fields. For years, OPEC have not been granting new drilling leases to Western oil companies. That's why the deep sea has become attractive. The technology to scan the deep basins for oil is based on compressed air. So-called air guns produce the loudest known human-made sound. Within milliseconds, the air guns produce giant bubbles, which when collapsing again produce pressure waves, which penetrate more than 10 kilometers into the deep ocean floor. Oil and gas deposits reflect a known echo pattern. The fact it's harmful to whales and dolphins is accepted. Step by step, hidden fields are mapped. Hanover, the scientists of the German Federal Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources have collected a vast body of data over the last decades. They're especially keen on areas where no commercial oil company has taken the financial risk to survey.
Hier sehen wir ganz hohe Amplituden.
These amplitudes signify a fair probability that oil and gas are hiding within the sediment. The question remains, where is that oil and gas coming from? Likely from down here. 5 or 6 kilometers deep, the hydrocarbons are formed. From there, they slowly migrate up the ridge into these reefs, get caught, and enrich also this sediment. Here, the hydrocarbons are trapped.
Exploration expeditions to find new reservoirs are becoming more technologically demanding and expensive. Lately, also the polar region has come into play.
Many are postulating rich reserves up in the north, but first they have to be found and verified, which is still technically extremely difficult.
To date, it remains unknown how much oil is hiding in the Arctic. Also, the technologies are still lacking to recover the oil safely under such harsh conditions. An economic exploration of the Arctic fields is still decades into the future, and if there are accidents that far north, they will be catastrophic. Meanwhile, the oil prospectors are entering deeper and deeper into the oceans on their search for the precious liquid. 200 kilometers offshore, the drilling complex Perdido towers in the Gulf of Mexico. The drilling operation is at its completion stage. From planning to drilling to production, a deep-sea well requires tremendous effort and tremendous dollars. First, 2,500 meters of water have to be traversed. Then the drilling bit has to grind its way through 2 more kilometers of hard rock. Dale Snyder is the Perdido project manager. He runs some last technical checks. Every step needs to be controlled. Even smallest mistakes could lead to a catastrophe.
On the bottom of the pipe, we're going to go down to 14,000 foot. Screw pipe will be 15,000? Yeah, almost. When it's time to use it, if we have any well-controlled situations.
The seismic profiles were studied carefully beforehand by geologist Mfon in the Netherlands. 2,000 meters below the ocean floor runs the Perdido mountain chain, from which the oil field derived its name. The oil-containing layers are well visible.
This can tell you that there might be oil or gas in there, but they call it amplitude. This bright red is indicating that possibly you might have a nice hydrocarbon in there.
So we really see how the oil is moving up the reservoir. This is fantastic. The ability to actually build structures that can stand on the ocean. And that really truly opened up the deep water. Perdido, that will be the world's deepest development.
From the idea to completion, it took a total of 14 years. In 2010, 3 months before the explosion of the Deepwater Horizon, Perdido started successfully to produce. Both made use of similar deep-sea technologies. Their successful functioning under such extreme pressures and temperatures could never be 100% guaranteed by any engineer. A complex system of pipes links distant production wells to a common production operation. If serious problems ever arose, there are no guaranteed emergency methods available to stop a free flow of oil. Back to the platform. The remote underwater vehicle is made ready. Dale Snyder is controlling the pipeline manifolds. Cameras monitor every step. opening a glimpse into a world still incompletely understood.
Okay, we're standing by on call. This is the one in the cage. But you got two.
At the ocean floor is a manifold. It has bundles of pipe arriving from different production wells. The strain on the technology rises exponentially with increasing depth. To connect Perdido with the next pipeline system, the engineers had to install 120 kilometers of tubing under extreme conditions, running through valleys and mountain slopes.
The expectation is that we've designed the platform to produce 100,000 barrels of oil per day.
About 35,000 wells had been drilled in the Gulf of Mexico, all without major accidents. Perdido sets a new record, safely unlocking sources covered by 2,500 meters of water. Yet how much risk is still involved should become obvious just a few months later. On April 20th, 2010, a powerful explosion rocks the Deepwater Horizon drilling platform. 115 workers are rescued, 11 lose their lives. It leads to what will become America's largest oil spill. Over the next 3 months, a leak 1,500 meters below the surface can't be stopped. An estimated 780 million liters of crude gush uncontrolled into the sea. Until its explosion, the Deepwater Horizon had an excellent safety record. Their crew successfully completed a well into 10 kilometers of depth. Now they attempted to drill a highly pressurized reservoir in 5,700 meters depth. Yet complications began to pile up, as the chief mechanic, Doug Brown, recalls.
Yes, that well was a complete nightmare from the moment we started on it.
The drilling began in October 2009. Then Hurricane Ida swept through the Gulf. After only 40 days, the first drilling attempt had to be suspended.
The drilling of that well and up to the completion was only supposed to take, I believe they said, like 90 days. And with all the problems that have happened with that well, the drilling was way far behind schedule. And it was costing BP millions of dollars. I'm pretty sure it was in the millions. And so there was a lot of pressure for them to hurry up and complete this well.
One day of a deep-sea drilling amounts to $500,000, which puts enormous pressures on the management to complete the process.
And if you go too fast, like in this case, what it does is it causes the formation that they're drilling through to fracture. And once it's fractured, the drilling fluid, or mud as we call it, will seep through the fractures and they'll start losing the mud. I've seen lots of kicks, gas coming up from the well. And we would normally, I've never seen it ever go beyond 1,000 units. But this well repeatedly kept giving us as high as 3,000 units. That's the highest I've ever seen in my entire career out there.
Drill holes never run absolutely straight, and centralizers are used to center the pipe in a hole. Halliburton recommended 21 centralizers, but BP only orders 6 installed. A later injected cement seal cannot reach all sides of the pipe. BP could have ordered a cement bond test, which could have detected the lack of seal, but declined it.
And ignored a lot of things that were wrong, just so they can save themselves money.
10 hours later, the gas and oil starts to shoot up the well bore. At this point, only the blowout preventer can close the well. But the hydraulic pressure is too weak to shear the pipe, only squeezing it without sealing it. Gas and oil shoot up from the unsecured wellbore where it ignites and leads to the explosion. 2 months later, the oil spill reaches the size of Portugal. A small fraction is skimmed from the water. Another estimated 40 million liters are burned intentionally at the surface. The greatest concern is that the crude will reach the U.S. coast, less than 80 kilometers away. BP wants to avoid such a public display at all costs and start a risky experiment. They spray Corexit on the oil, a chemical dispersant which was banned in Europe years earlier. More than 4 million liters of Corexit are disseminated throughout the Gulf. It shall help break up the oil to make it more easily digestible by bacteria. Essentially, the chemical dissolves the plumes of red oil into fine droplets. This is how Corexit works. The chemicals break the oil down into tiny globules that sink below the surface and are suspended in the water, making the oil almost invisible to the naked eye. But it's still there. It's just been effectively distributed throughout the water column. BP claims the dispersant is not dangerous and decides to begin an even riskier experiment. They apply Corexit directly into the deep sea. In about 1,500 meters of depth, they pump a further 2.5 million liters of the aggressive liquid into the gushing oil. Measurements reveal that the bacterial decay of the oil is not occurring as planned. Instead, a large solid oil plume is discovered at a depth of 1,200 meters. In this area, natural water upcurrents occur which lift nutrients from the deep sea. Now they also lift oil, which will drift on with the Gulf Stream current. Is Corexit as harmless to the food chain as claimed? Ships involved in the cleanup have reported an increase of engine damages. Corexit dissolves even essential rubber seals. Cleaning doesn't seem to help. Corexit was also widely used after the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska. Since that time, marine toxicologist Ricky Ott has specialized on the side effects of Corexit.
The industry likes to say the oil will miraculously be eaten by, bacteria and disappear. Bacteria are very good at eating alkanes. These are straight chain carbons that are hitched together much like a train with different cars. The problem is, the mess that's in the Gulf is alkanes and aromatics.
Even bacteria break down long-chain oil molecules. They're not effective against ball-shaped ones. These remain in the water.
Corexit 9527 contains a human health hazard. It breaks apart blood and breaks down blood cells, causes kidney damage, liver damage, blood disorders, and it even kills babies in the womb. It's a fetal toxin. This is a nasty chemical. The scientific community knows that dispersed oil is more toxic than not dispersed oil, and it knows that dispersants and dispersed oil are more toxic than oil alone. So what this chemical effectively does for the oil industry is it takes care of a public relation nightmare, which is oil all over the surface of the ocean, and pushes the oil instead down into the water column.
On July 15th, 90 days after the explosion, and an estimated 750 million liters later, BP manages to plug the well. On their third approach, they place a temporary cap onto the wellhead.
All right, guys, they're moving in.
How we doing, Jared?
We got a little bit more to go. All right, Jeff, go ahead and let go. Go ahead, let go. How you looking? Looking like we're on mark. Looks right from in.
Yet such a cap is considered only temporal.
Yeah, roger that. We are plugged in.
This is why BP was also drilling a so-called relief well. After 3 months, the relief well reaches the main reservoir in about 5 kilometers of depth. A special mixture of heavy kill mud is pumped down, which shall force down the lighter oil and prevent it from ever rising again. Afterwards, they pump down a distinctive concrete to seal the well permanently. Only the lowest 200 meters of the 3,000-meter-long well bore are sealed, leaving small pockets of hydrocarbons above unsealed. Due to the drilling operation with too much pressure, many fractures occurred along the well. This may allow oil and gas to continue to seep up into the water, but nobody will see it. All deep-sea surveillance cameras were switched off when the well was officially announced to be killed. Life seems back to normal in the Gulf of Mexico. The U.S. government does not want to injure its national oil production. But at what price?
Half the Gulf of Mexico is almost depleted, and the other half is resting on a handful of supergiant fields that will not be supergiants 5 years from now. Only 2 fields reached their design capacity. The average got to 50% of the design capacity for about a month or 2. So they were all effectively commercial failures, in a sense, because had they basically known that they could only produce that little, they would have spent 1/3 the amount of money and come up with smaller things. So this is the best minds in the industry that are excitedly talking about these things, and they don't tend to go back and look at their own data.
Even Matt Simmons, who owes much of his success to high-end oil technology investments, is concerned.
But what worried me, that if you were 5,000 feet underwater, you had a problem. Could you ever put it out? And the answer is no. We just assumed that it would put itself out. And the tragic crescendo of Macondo is it really shows that basically what we have left is really tough to do. And exposes the industry to risks that we didn't develop equipment to adequately do. And that problem could happen to anybody.
The images of the Deepwater Horizon were seen across the globe. Do we have to prepare ourselves for similar catastrophic events in the future? Washington has allegedly tightened the regulations for new drilling operations, and from now on, the CEO of an oil company can be made responsible in person for future accidents due to his management mistakes. Our thirst for oil remains insatiable, but how long will we be able to continue our present level of carefree consumption? It's irritating that OPEC still says there's nothing to worry about after their reservoirs have been pumped and pumped over years.
There is abundance of oil in the ground, especially in the Gulf, which is oil accessible and cheap and can be enough for the end of the century.
1988, something miraculous happened. Suddenly, the official reserves of Iraq doubled to 100 billion barrels. Also, Abu Dhabi, Iran, and Saudi Arabia increased the official number of available barrels. Prior to this, OPEC enacted a new regulation, which allowed a member to pump and sell more oil if it had more oil. Where did the sudden increase of oil come from?
One cannot say that all these numbers by OPEC are true. One has to find out case by case.
If any of those numbers were exaggerated back then, it would lead to an overestimation of remaining global reserves to this day. The era of easy oil seems to be over for good.
We have concentrated over the years on the easy oil, as we call it, the light Brent type of oil. Now we have to focus on oil which is a little bit more difficult to get out of the ground, and that's where our research is focused on.
Canada. These sands hold the second largest reserves of oil presently known. Holding clay and water, it contains up to 20% heavy oil. To retrieve this resource, the sand is mixed with hot water and heated in giant silos. The usage of energy and water is enormous. To gain 1 ton of crude, 4 tons of water are used. Afterwards, the oil-water mixture needs to be separated. The recycling process is laborious, and any accident would cause an environmental disaster. The oil sands of Canada are spread out over an area larger than Great Britain, yet only 20% are available for open pit mining. Recently, the deep layers of oil sand spawned commercial interests. Still in an experimental stage, the researchers are exploring ways to separate the oil without having to add any hot water.
Also das sind jetzt hier Gesteinsproben, die entsprechen dem, was
These are samples which resemble the sands of Canada. In our experiment, we measure the temperature regime with these thin wires to understand how to extract the crude by enhancing the oil flow.
Like a gigantic underground oven, thousands of electrical rods heat up all of the sand. This requires an extreme amount of energy. Once the sand is heated, the oil breaks free and the valuable light oil rises to the top, leaving the heavy crude behind. A facility for a field trial has already started, but the heating procedure is still too expensive in comparison to open pit mining if it is applied on a larger scale. When Canadian sands are looked at as a whole, engineering restrictions and environmental laws will peak production capacity at a level of 5 million barrels per day. Yet again, far less than the world's growing demand. The battle to control oil has been going on for years. Kuwait, Iraq, and recently Libya are but pawns in this very costly game.
If we basically find ourselves 10 years from now with only the ability to use 60 million barrels a day of oil, and we don't have a very carefully organized plan that encompasses all the major countries, then we'll basically, in all likelihood, be in the midst of the nastiest war that we've ever fought, and it won't last very long. Because we'll destroy each other. And so, which is why I think it's so important that people understand this isn't fun and games. It's not a way to make some money on owning some drilling stocks. It is the singular issue of the 21st century.
Is the world reaching an end of the oil age as we know it? Some would say no. At the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Russian physicist Vladimir Kucherov teaches energy technology. Kucherov is coordinating an international research team on the origin of oil.
We really know how to find new hydrocarbon deposits over the world.
Russia is the second largest oil producer worldwide, but 2/3 of its fields are already in decline. The Romashkino, southwest of the Ural Mountains, is one of the most productive Russian fields. In the 1980s, many of its wells went dry. Then, in 1990, suddenly new oil started to flow from these dry holes. The new oil has a different density and molecular makeup than the previous. At Kazan State University, Irina Plotnikova is analyzing the chemical structure. The so-called isotopic fingerprint, which details all elements of the oil, looks different than the previous oil. What could have caused these alterations?
This is only one possibility. Oil came from the depths. There are no organic sources for this huge amount of oil extracted.
Biological decomposition processes do not explain this fast-forming oil. The research team of Kucherov believes that hydrocarbons are still synthesizing within the upper Earth mantle at a depth of around 240 kilometers. The heat and pressure merge the existing carbon and hydrogen into hydrocarbons, our crude oil. If their theory is correct, the question remains how the new oil can rise to a retrievable level.
Under the big oil field, we see disintegration of Earth's crust and upper mantle.
And it looks like a huge channel. You see the landscape, it's about 100-150 kilometers in diameter.
Romashkino is located close to the Ural mountain range. This is where deep faults run up from below. The geological analysis revealed exceptional strong magnetic fields and increases in ground temperature. The concept that the Earth is producing continuously oil is not new. It was first theorized by Dmitry Mendeleev about 100 years ago. Unfortunately, he was missing the scientific tools to prove his theory of the so-called abiotic origin of oil. Finally, a 7,000-meter research well was drilled into hard granite rock in the 1980s. They drilled far below the ocean sediment, and there they found traces of oil where, according to Western oil geologists, it should not exist. In 2008, the well was abandoned. It was for research purposes only. These findings support the abiotic origin theory, but still Western researchers stay skeptical. Russian oil experts have a conference on the Romashkino field. The topic is the phenomenon of the regenerating oil reservoirs. Instead of depleting, the oil wells periodically rejuvenate. This find created an interest by the chief scientist of the Russian oil company Tatneft.
We are located in the center of supergiant oil field Romashkino. Now we seeking methods for locating channels. Now we only in the starting point for using idea of abiogenic origin.
Is oil, after all, an infinite resource? To this day, no Western oil company has adopted the theory of abiotic oil. If Kucherov is correct, oil should be searched for predominantly near fractured geological structures, where already known deep faults reach further below. Western experts stay skeptical to this non-biological origin of oil, even hostile.
Traditional knowledge is comes from biological substance. Plants, either plants or some insects or some living creatures. But I may be wrong.
They all have actually found traces of methane. So I believe it is well possible that methane can be generated in a non-organic manner. But so far, indeed, nobody has been able to prove an overabundance of that methane. And indeed, when you look at the rocks where that methane would be stored, these are very, very difficult hydrocarbons, if you want.
Most oil fields were found in ancient ocean sediments, which seems to support the Western scientific belief. Still, various exceptions exist, such as in Vietnam, where oil and gas are found in granite rock. Austria. Meanwhile, 7 months have passed. The drill head reached 6,000 meters of depth. Yet neither gas nor oil have been found so far. Drill master Vinta takes samples for a laboratory analysis. Every fact is valuable. Petrified single-celled organisms, evidence of ancient biological life.
This is always a piece of luck, to find such beautiful microfossils in the drilling mud.
Are these microfossils proof enough that the biological origin of oil is the only origin?
Of course, also hydrocarbons exist of anorganic origin, as various space expeditions prove. There are planets with oceans filled entirely with liquid hydrocarbons.
On various planets, NASA discovered the components of oil, hydrocarbons. Neither on Titan nor Mars did biological life exist which could explain the presence of methane. Fundamental research in the deep sea. Where the tectonic plates drift apart, the researchers of IFM GeoMar are measuring a high concentration of the hydrocarbon methane. Below where the tectonic plates drift apart, it is highly improbable that this organic matter was ever present there. This proves that hydrocarbons do form without biological sources. Even with the constant schism in theories with the West, the Russian researchers predict new oil regions to be discovered close to active and deep faults, such as in South America. Kucherov's team uses maps which show where deep fault lines cross and indicate where more oil reserves could be filled from channels down to the upper Earth mantle.
Giant fields have been discovered exactly in this predicted disjunctive nodes.
90% of all known oil fields could be explained also by the abiotic theory. Kucherov and his team are at work on a new software to predict further spots.
In this area, giant oil and gas fields were discovered. But look at this. There are a lot of perspective zones for the new giant oil and gas fields. And this is the perspective zone for the new oil giant, I would like to underline, giant oil and gas fields.
Oil from the depth of our planet? The abiotic theory is controversial, but there is support for it. Even though it's speculative, why hasn't the West even looked at it?
Practically, we don't touch this. But it would be interesting, as it implies we would be able to search for oil everywhere.
And they're talking about that has proved that oil fields rejuvenate themselves. If they have, then the 100 to 200 largest depleted oil fields certainly have been unlucky. They have not one of them rejuvenated themselves. So I think it's sort of beyond optimism. It's dreams.
Is it either biological or it's more planet Earth produced as such? So we could have more production of oil in the future. Don't worry. That's one argument, but I don't know which is true. So I don't have any good judgmental knowledge expertise to say either.
For sure, also an abiotic origin exists. But to be commercially viable, we lack the tools for such tasks and the knowledge how to gauge where to find it.
Is oil an infinite resource of the cosmos or a finite biological treasure? The origin of oil remains a mystery still to this day. Kucherov and his team are still searching for investors to be able to prove their theory on a large scale. At present, no comparable substitute for oil exists to drive our mobile world. On the one hand, we need the oil industry to continue to find the oil. On the other hand, this feeds oil industry profits due to rising prices and alleged scarcity. Unfortunately, this type of battle has been going on for years and years. It is not a war that we will win, nor is it a war that will end soon. But one thing is for certain. To locate new oil remains one of the most important challenges of the 21st century.